Hi there, this is Josh from Literary Gladiators, and today I'm here to talk about a short story. The short story that I'm going to be talking about was released in Volume 33, Number 4 in the Gettysburg Review, which was released in the first quarter of 2022. And that particular short story is called Only Be Good Things by Jackson Saul. Jackson Saul works for University of Alabama Press, and he also oversaw production of the Black Warrior Review. He's published short stories in various magazines, and he is at this time putting together a short story collection, a novel, and a nonfiction book. But this particular short story is really reflective of writers such as Chaim Potok, Saul Bellow, Philip Roth. I think that it takes on the attitudes of Saul Bellow and Philip Roth, but on the landscape that Chaim Potok would put together. Because this particular story pertains to someone walking away from Hasidim. And in particular, the central character is also named Chaim. Chaim has walked away from the Satmar sect of Hasidic Judaism, and he's currently living in it feels like a boarding house, but it's more like an apartment where he lives with his friend Norbert, and he's tried to get work, but he hasn't been able to do so, and he's constantly being hounded by his younger sister Malki, who wants him to come back to their community, come back home, so that he can take care of his wife Yida and their newborn son. But the one thing that drove him away, aside from being overwhelmed by the Satmar sect itself, is the overlooming, abrasive, and overwhelming presence of his father. At this time, his father's sick, and during the peace, he dies. But he gives pretty good reason. He makes mention to the fact that he's a very rough man. For instance, he says, and I quote, "All my past haircuts consisted of my father pinning me to a kitchen chair, one hand digging into my shoulder with sharp fingernails, and the other recklessly pruning around my payet. As I quivered beneath his scissors during this, at the barber haircut. As during those from my father, I prayed under my breath to get out intact," which he almost felt like he was going to get seriously hurt during each of those, and that's not really how you should be feeling when you're getting a haircut. His father is also a very lazy man. There are these stereotypes pertaining to those within Hasidim being Hasidic, not gravitating toward working, and his father is one that he would be supportive of that argument, where he said, "Where in the Torah do you see the command to work?" My father would ask. "It only tells us when not to work." And Chaim's father, they lived off their grandfather's Social Security, his father's scholarship, and he also took advantage of government assistance and other loopholes, which people that take advantage in that way really disgust me. Me as a reader and me as a person, I don't like it when people take advantage of things that are meant to be there in order to tend to people that actually need that money and cannot acquire it in any other way. But at the same time, they only use as much as they absolutely need. And when people take advantage and exceed somebody who is struggling when actually putting in the effort to work, that in itself bothers me. And people like Chaim's father, not only is he very vehement on the fact that his way is the right way and there's no other way, his way is not the right way. And these things are not an honorable way of living. He also described him as a gross man. The fact that he would eat on the toilet with the door open. And then he was also very scary, where he was scarier not when he yelled, but when he whispered. And that he was so close that you could smell his breath. Then you had the dinners that he would hijack the quiet, especially when Chaim had a friend over. It felt very embarrassing. But he was a driving force to the family. He was a major reason that Chaim walked away from his family, his community, his religion. And he was also, his demise was a reason why Chaim made the move to take steps toward returning. But it wasn't just his father. There was also the community itself that proved to be an issue. That of his encounter with the Shamron. The Shamron refers to a neighborhood watch group in Orthodox and Hasidic communities. They prove to be the security that will go after subjects that they feel are proving to be a direct threat to their community. And when Chaim returns, they recall him leaving their community, and Benjamin was one such person that Chaim went to school with, and Benjamin ended up becoming part of the Shamron, and when he goes there, they see him as being a threat. They accuse him of trying to break into a car, but I don't think that was his intent. We're only getting Chaim's perspective, and that's something to really keep into account. But ultimately, they maul him to the point that he requires hospital attention, and he decides to go back and live with Norbert. It's a very tough circumstance because his father's not the only reason that being part of this community is strenuous, but also the community itself, where he said that pertaining to Satmar Hasidism, and in particular this particular community, that Chaim's under restriction that goes well beyond his father. He says, as per page 540 of this particular magazine, "My marriage was originally a thrust toward independence and away from my family. But the problem, I knew deep down, wasn't just my father. Getting married within Satmar means getting married not only to a spouse, but to a system." And There are different sects of Hasidism, and Satmar is among the strictest, which they also are major separatists, which, from what I had gathered, the difference between the certain sects is, as far as Satmar Hasidism is concerned, they discourage newcomers and they rely more on the birth rate, which they do have they will have more kids than the average. But this family was somewhat of an exception because Chaim's parents only had 2 kids. It was him and his younger sister Malki. I think they wanted more, but they only ended up with 2. It is very difficult, though, in any given circumstance to be able to break away from an overwhelming and structured lifestyle and being able to call your own shots. I mean, in Chaim's circumstance, it's very difficult, but in general, it's very difficult. It's especially difficult when you are in a very dominant and an abrasive establishment that's driven and ruling by a need for control. And we see a lot of that wherever we go. And they find ways to manipulate and cheat and destroy if they have to, as far as being able to maintain their dominance is concerned. And that's also the way a nation is structured as well, not just a religion or a community that is structured by religion. I personally think that Chaim should have thought about his family, and I think that he should have been able to care for them, because once you get married and start a family, that is a commitment. But where I would defend Chaim is that he was thrown into the circumstance. I think that he wanted to step back and take his time, but he was forced. He was forced into marriage. He was forced into having a child. He was probably going to be forced into having more children. But this was just him pretty much saying, I can't take it anymore. I need to get out. And he went on to move with his friend Norbert. And that his home with Norbert was his safe zone. It was a safe space, safe, comfortable, and when things didn't go right, he ultimately walked away from the harsh realities to this particular safe space. This safe space, it offers contentment, but it does not offer much of a chance for progression. So he can be content, but that's as far as he's going to get. And I think that this is very well illustrated toward the very end of the piece, where he says, "The rising sun is still obscured by buildings when I step outside, but the sky is pink overhead," which, the sun is rising, so it denotes that it's morning, but the pink sky overhead pretty much, to me, makes me think of that red sky at dawn, sailors be warned. And I think that while he's walking to something that's a little bit more positive than being mauled, he's not really walking into something that's going to help him out in the long run. He's walking away from an opportunity. He's going to need to start standing up for himself, but to him that's work for another day. But there's also that sense that these issues are part of Chaim's doing as well, because Norbert tells him about his circumstances, and that the issues that Norbert had with his parents were nitpicks. They weren't extreme, and he even tells him that he didn't want to keep telling him about certain details pertaining to his parents because he said, and I quote, "It would only be good things. You don't want to hear that," which I think that was Norbert realizing that some of his undoing was his own fault, and some of Chaim walking away from his environment was his own fault too. And he's not able to come to that realization and get over that hump of becoming one better. And that's what his wife and newborn son could be relying on, and they could use him there for help. Even his sister and his mother could use him there for help. Their father, and I think that the fact that he could now be foundational in his household with his father being gone was why he took that step. But he wasn't going to be able to do that within the community that he left. Because when you leave, you're pretty much making a commitment against Hasidism. I don't think that the Shamron should be judged based off of this group of people. But I don't think that this Shamron really, unless he was actually a clear threat, or if he actually stole something. We don't know if he did because he didn't say anything, but we get that sense that he didn't. They were not justified in their actions. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that they are not welcoming of those that are not like them. But I think that religion that serves merely as an organization in order to assert dominance, or as a toxic community, is merely a filling to a shell. It's not just this particular religion. You can incorporate others. You can incorporate Christianity. You can incorporate Islam. You can incorporate you can even incorporate, like Scientology is probably one of the greatest examples. But anyone that treats others poorly and takes advantage in the name of religion and in the name of a higher being or of a greater good, it's not fulfilling a meaningful religion or a genuine good. And it's merely serving as a toxin. And I think that is what Chaim is struggling with. Is he's surrounded by people, not necessarily a religion trying to enforce good morals, but somebody that's using their religion in order to force their will on others. He's dealing with that. He's struggling to be able to break away from that. And in his area of contentment is really having a tough time. But as far as his outlook on God is concerned, he makes mention toward the end of the piece that my father would say that God is in the world, in everything, but I see that he is really only where we let him in, and nobody seems to have let him in anywhere. He is relegated to heaven, doomed to fume and huff. From there he watches me, bursting with rage over my misdeeds, but the world, however evil and unkind, takes care that my descent proceeds after the correct rules of the art. evenly and slowly, with no break in rhythm. And I think he's pretty truthful in how people use God or the higher being for human convenience, and that he's used when it supports their point or their belief, and people do that with everything, especially when it comes to discussions about politics. Chaim may be a stumbling mess, especially by the end of this piece, especially throughout the piece, but he is still standing, and he has that opportunity to make a better life for himself. Hopefully he can work something out where his wife and newborn son can take part. Maybe his family, maybe even his sister and mother. There's a possibility that he starts anew and finds a new wife and starts another family. But the question at hand is whether or not Chaim is worse off or of equal footing with those that use God for their own benefit, because Chaim is at least able to admit the way of the world. But I think the answer to that question is that it all depends on the direction in which Chaim is heading. Whether he's heading toward the direction of good and engaging in God's will. But I think that this was a very thought-provoking story, and it really gave me a greater sense of some of the struggles that pertain to organized religion. And when organized religion takes a path that goes against what an organized religion is supposed to. And the struggle that Chaim is put through as far as being someone that's looking to walk away and start on his own footing is concerned. There are moments that are pretty aggravating, but I think that this is what this piece is trying to do. It does take on the aggravation that I've seen in works that Saul Bellow and Philip Roth have written. Chaim Potok has that landscape where they are either Hasidic or Orthodox. However, with his subjects, the struggle is more so basic, such as being able to demonstrate an artistic ability. Whereas these characters are upset with their religion forthright and want to step away. But I want to look more into Jackson Saul and his writing, and I do want to read more of the issues that I have of the Gettysburg Review, and when I have the opportunity and when I'm asked, I'm probably going to renew my subscription. This has been one of my favorite literary magazines that I've been subscribed to. Thank you for tuning into this video. I hope you check out some more videos from our channel. If you like what you see on our channel, please subscribe. We have a lot of great content, and if you're not as much into what I put out, we have over 20 other contributors, and they may put something out that you like. And there are probably things that I'm going to go over that you may like. But if you like this video, please give it a good old like. If you want to talk about this a little bit more, please feel free to do so in the comments. If you really like what you see from myself and from the contributors on this channel, please support us on our Patreon, for the money that we make allows us to provide you, the viewer, with even more great content. For now, keep reading.